Hi everybody, my name is Jimmy and welcome back to Jimmy Does Knitting. This is my knitting podcast where we pick a topic and we go from there. Today the topic is test knitting. Before we get into that, you can check me out as Jimmy Does Knitting on Ravelry, Instagram, Ko-Fi, and I have patterns for sale and we have fun. My stories is where my most up-to-date information is. Instagram has stuff that you probably will not see on the podcast. And yeah, I think that's about all of the general admin. These episodes are coming out a little bit slower just because I need to do some stuff. Like I need to get ahead in terms of pattern writing and life is happening and all of that stuff. My voice is a little lower today. I think Mr. Does Knitting has been pretty sick for the last couple of weeks and I've avoided it, but I think he finally got me. So we're recording now and hopefully I'm like not dead by the end of it, but that's what's going on. Test knitting. We're going to talk about what is test knitting. I will focus on the two projects that I am test knitting or have test knitted, one of which is this. And then we'll just go over some other things of test knitting in the end. But it's a part of Instagram and all of this other stuff of the knitting world, which is kind of intriguing. And I'll give you some tips and tricks, sort of what you should expect, what you shouldn't expect, and how to be a good tester and all of that. So let's get into it. First of all, what is test knitting? Test knitting is when somebody writes a pattern for something. Theoretically, it has already been tech edited and they want to give it to people to knit. The pattern usually is rough and there are no photos in it, but theoretically it should be publishable. You should not have your testers figuring stuff out for you or, trying to troubleshoot a bunch of stuff. The pattern theoretically should be good to go. When it comes to garments, this is a little bit rougher because you just really knit one garment. You don't knit all sizes. And especially with some of the larger sizes, some of the sizing changes, which we can discuss on this one. But theoretically, the pattern is there to go. You test it, you enjoy it. It's sort of like a preview knit, and then they make some final changes, some final edits. Of course, everybody has different techniques and perspectives and experience levels, and so they bring that into the test. Modifications are made, and then the pattern is released. And that is theoretically what testing is, and we can get more into the nuance of it. How do you find test knits? Test knits I usually find on Instagram, but people have different ways of doing it. There's many ways of setting up a test as there are designers. I usually do Instagram. I follow some test knit accounts. I follow some accounts from people who are designing. There are Ravelry groups. Some people have a pool of testers that they always choose from, and sometimes that opens up, sometimes it's fixed. Sometimes it's a newsletter situation where they have a regular newsletter, and those people who subscribe to the newsletter, which is usually free, get the chance to do the testing. Some designers are very overwhelmed with tests. Others, like me, usually are quite underwhelmed with the amount of applicants that they get. So that can vary, designer, type of project, all that sort of thing, how it goes. There are secret tests, so those are usually for items that are going to be published, but the publication does not want you to know what that design is. Or there are some very open tests, once again like this, which I've been posting about on Instagram as it goes along, because it's no secret. And I think that's the basics about testing, and then we'll go through everything with a focus on testing. And yeah, we'll see what happens. So this is my first test. This is a gifted pattern, so to speak. All of these are gifted patterns. And this yarn was also gifted to me. This is the Katholt Sweater Man by Knitting for Olive. In terms of yarn gifting, this is something interesting. Usually this is not the case. Usually you have to buy your own yarn and try it out. It would be very expensive to pay for everybody's yarn. You want like 3 or 4 people testing each size. They're usually around 10 sizes. Buying 40 quantities of yarn and sending that out is usually difficult. Because this is a yarn brand and they wanted all of their tests in their yarn, they very graciously sent out the yarn to all of the testers in the quantities that they needed in order to test the sweater. Sometimes if you're working with a yarn dyer or a shop or something, they will give you a percentage off. Every once in a while, designers can arrange, so especially the larger sizes or people who have more of a financial need can get some yarn support. That could either be a discount or the yarn given to them. It sort of all depends on whatever situation is happening with all of that. So that's the deal with yarn. Expect to buy your own yarn is what I have to say. But this was a lovely gifted yarn, and let's get into it. This is Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino. I did it in these 2 colors. This is the color Coal, and this is the color Gray Pearl, which is actually really nice. It has sort of like a yellow base with like a purple over dye almost, which I really like. So I thought that was nice. I almost wish I would have gone a little bit lower contrast, but I don't know. We'll see. So the sweater is a top-down raglan. You start casting off on the back. The back is a little bit longer. You can see these rows. And then you increase, and it's a pretty standard top-down raglan if you've ever knit that. It has this 1x1 color work, so it's really easy. It's like super beginner friendly, both in terms of construction, but also in terms of the color work. They wanted to know, and what I also think is really good feedback, although not 100% necessary, is to give comments on the pattern, seeing if there are any issues. So I did notice an issue with my size that got the numbers off. So the body and the sleeves are a little larger than they intended because of just an error, which they can fix by the time that they publish it. So that is one thing. Another thing is like, how does it fit? So I was supposed to knit the 40-inch circumference test. This ended up being 44 inches circumference, which is larger than both they and I expected it. Part of this was the math error, and part of it was my gauge. I think I didn't want to be so tight with the color work, but in the end, it actually ended up being like 1x1 color work is nothing to really worry about color work gauge. And so I made it a little bit bigger than it needed to be. So there is sort of that happened to it. So for me, it's quite oversized, but I think in the end, that's pretty good just because of the proportions of the sleeve and like the length of everything, that it allows it for like more ease than perhaps they say in the pattern. It's just going to be a comfy oversized sweater because of how it's knit. I did shorten the sleeves a little bit because I found the length was a little too long for me, but in terms of like depth and proportion, that was all fine. So those are things that I fed back to them. I also gave feedback on modifications that I made, which were not very much. So I modified the sleeve length. I just rapid decreased at the end. You can see it's a little bit puffy just to get the length that I want. So I followed the pattern and I said maybe the increases or the decreases on the sleeve go a little faster, just because I thought it would make for a nicer shape of a sleeve and more of a nice knitting process. I think they made the increases where they did because it was dumb easy for like a first top-down raglan person. So I think that was one thing. What else did I change? I put in short rows in the back of the neck. That's more a me thing. I slouch. I think that they have enough short rows in the back to make this good, but for a total neck, you can't really see it because my microphone is pulling on it, but like if I were to not do the short rows, you would get like a little bit of like bunching here on me personally because my neck shoots forward. So it would curl up on like a normal shaped person with like decent posture. you're not going to have that, but for this one I would. So I did that too. And then I changed the decreases on the inside. I didn't change the rate. I just changed like the angle of them. It was like really, really minor that would not affect the pattern, but it's something that I did that I just prefer it to be a little different. So what I do, and I think is important, and you always have to check with the person, is if you're doing modifications on the garment, you have to see if that's like acceptable. Quite frequently, I do not knit a lot of tests because they're designed for women, and I would have to lengthen the yoke depth, which changes the sleeve construction on most of them if they're top-down sleeves. So some designers are like, yeah, that's fine. You can do it to make it fit your body. Other designers are like, no, I really want to test size 4, and you need to, you know, test to see if that fits you. So I think that that's an important thing to do. The modifications I did don't really affect the garment in any way, and they pretty much follow the instructions because it also says like knit into desired length, you know? So I think that that's something important, that if you are testing, to not go like crazy off the rails, which I think some of you more experienced knitters will do, or can do. But to really try to stick close to the pattern, get the stitch counts, and make sure that everything lines up correctly. I think that that's a good way to do it. And then, yeah, I mean, I really think that that's about it. How they did this particular test is they sent an email PDF with some instructions in the email, and then the PDF rough draft pattern, and then you sort of knit it from your size. And when you were done, you sent back a couple of pictures and some feedback, and specifically stuff for the questions they asked, and if you wanted to include anything else, then do that. So that's one way of doing it. I've had my tests are run on Discord, so there's like a chat. I might change that coming up. I'm not entirely sure that Discord is the medium that I want to be using, but I've seen also within Slack, or there are Instagram conversations or Ravelry boards or something like that where people can talk. Some people have, like, they'll send you the pattern and they'll update it when they need to update it. Some people send you like a live doc where you can comment on it and make suggestions, and then they kind of change it. There's a bunch of ways to do different patterns and different test preferences. I think it all just depends on the person, their bandwidth, and the type of project it is. I think for especially something like a garment or a more complicated project, having a chat is quite nice because people can talk about their experiences at the same time. People are going to be at different points in different things, but like there's usually somebody with maybe a higher skill level than you that can help you troubleshoot the patterns, and so like the onus doesn't necessarily come back on the designer themselves. So there is that. One thing that I think is really good about this is the men are knitting darker, and like that's really important information to know for knitting for olive. I think they have quite a wide range of neutrals, and they're not being used so much in this test because the men are darker. I've seen like 3 or 4 with a similar color combination. I've seen like 3 black ones. There's like petrol, there's like dark rust, there's navy I've only seen 1 light. So I think that's pretty good. If you post on social media, assuming that you can post on social media per the person's instructions, that always helps, especially if you're somebody with more followers. I think that it helps get the pattern out there and shows it on different body shapes, different color combinations that maybe you wouldn't do yourself. So that's an advantage of test knitting. Also, I think it's important or nice if you put your project on Ravelry, because that shows the people who look it up. Usually, a lot of times people find projects on Ravelry and they can see the different ways to do it, little notes, and I think that that makes you a better tester. And like a couple of images on Instagram is really helpful to the designer. Does knitting for olive need any help? Probably not. But like, you know, posting quality photos, showing off details having those comments, and like being comprehensive in your feedback makes you a better tester. Some people demand this out of testers, other people do not. I'm sort of the camp of you're knitting this, at your own time, and you're doing me a favor by previewing this, so I'm not so demanding. But if people post about it and talk about it and have a Ravelry page, I am more likely to include you in my test pool later on. Another thing I would like to say is some people just show up and they take the pattern and then you never hear from them again, and that's garbage. If you say you're going to do something, you should do something. I'm a firm believer in that. Life happens. I've had it where people have been like, look, I got COVID, my mom died, something like that. I can't finish this test. And then that's fine. Like, that's all right, because we all have those situations in your life. I think being communicative about that is important. And like, nobody's going to force you to do anything. But if you commit to doing something, show up to the test. Like if you're joining Slack or Discord or something, you should show up. And then you should also give feedback on time and then have the required amount like knit. A lot of times people will just say like, do the body in one sleeve by the time the test is done. Some tests are a little bit more reasonable in terms of time and some are not. When you knit a larger size, you're going to be knitting like double potentially the fabric of the smallest size. So it really varies in terms of like amount of time and amount of knitting and all of that stuff. And I think for this test, that is all I have to say. And let's get on to the next one. So the next test I would like to talk about is the Kip Sweater by the Crea Bea. I am knitting the size 2, 3-ish. We'll get into it and why I may or may not be a great tester. First, let's talk about the process. So how Rebecca has done this test is she put on Instagram, I'm testing for this. There was a Google form, you filled it out, and then she selected people for it. I was lucky enough to get in. And I think she had me down for size 4 originally. I don't know if that was my error or her error. And but she sent out the pattern in an email and all this stuff. So what I did, because I know that some people are very conscious about the sizing and stuff, I was like, size 4 is going to be too big. I cannot knit that. I'm a size 2 width. Can I knit the size 2? And she's like, sure, that's fine. It's all right. And then I looked at the schematic, which is very important, I think, especially if you're a different shape than what the standard shape is, to look at that. And I noticed that the armhole depth was like way too short. Like it would be like right up in my pit for the size 2. And so I said, can I do the size 2 with a size 3 length, or I'll just knit the size 3, whatever you prefer. And I think that this is important because some people will be like, no, just don't test. I'll pick somebody else. But she was really like gracious and was like, yeah, just knit what fits you. I wanted to show this on a male body, so it's all right. So she was really cool about that. And I was really appreciative of that. But you have to be like respectful of that. You can't really just like go into a test and change everything. You sort of have to like, you signed up to do this specific thing. You can do that. And so I cleared that with her, and then I ordered some yarn. So the yarn I ordered was not a surprise. I had some left over. Is this Vovo by Retrosaria, Rosa, Pumar. This is a sport weight yarn. I used this in my wind whistles, and I wanted this specifically because it's an all over texture, and this yarn shows texture very well, and I like working with this yarn. I think it's incredible. So I bought more of this. I bought the recommended amount for size 3, and then I also had some leftovers for my wind whistle. So I'm thinking that should be enough yarn, even though I'm going to elongate the sleeves and body. Which in general, it says on these patterns, like knit to desired length. So elongating it by like, 5 or 6 inches, I think is okay, as long as you don't change like the decrease rate or something like that. But anyway, this is a sport weight yarn. It's from Portugal. Everything's from the Iberian Peninsula. It's 50 grams, 143 meters, 156 yards. It's a sheep that I cannot pronounce. Campanisa sheep. So it's not merino, but it's also like quite soft and it's enjoyable to wear. I've worn my wind whistles a lot, so I know that I like this. I forgot something. I will be right back. Okay. Before we get into the test knitting part of this, I want to talk about yarn and gauge. So the pattern calls for Ulysse, which is not this, but this is close. This is Gilead. This is like the older brother of Ulysse. This is by Durham Natura. I use this in a couple of different things. But can you see how it's spun? It's more like loose and woolen spun? Is it worsted spun? I always get those two confused. But it has like, it's not like a bunch of tiny strands with a high twist that will give you good texture. This one blooms beautifully and it softens and stuff, but it acts differently than the Vovo that I have. So I'm gonna try to make this so you can see the difference in the types of yarn. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. Where's the camera? So like the Gilead is just a different type of yarn. It's going to bloom, it's going to expand, it's going to like be sort of a little bit more rustic and cozy. The Vovo is going to be a little bit higher twist. It has better texture, but it's not going to grow so much. And it is just like a different formula of yarn. I think it has 3 or 4 strands. It's almost like a 4-ply. But that is the difference in yarn. And I say that because one thing to note is gauge swatch. So for this specifically, it has a pattern that you have to get used to. And so a gauge swatch is really helpful in getting used to that. But the Ulysse, because it grows so much after blocking, uses the gauge that she put in the pattern. But because this does not, I had to size up a needle in order to get gauge. And some people were having gauge issues. Some of it's knitting, but some of it's actually like the type of yarn you use and the effect that you get. So hers is a little bit more like rustic and like woven looking. Mine will be a little bit more textural. Let me show you that right now. So this is what I have. I've done some stuff. So I've done the yoke of this and I wanted to get this done because I had other stuff coming up. And this is the most difficult part with feedback. The rest is just a little bit of shoulder shaping, the sleeves, and just knitting the body. But the stuff that needs the feedback is in the yoke. So this is a like English tailored, I think it's what it's called, is this technique. And it's a drop shoulder. So you cast on at the back of the neck and then you go down. So this one's really interesting, and this is the difference between test knitting and not test knitting. I think if I was not test knitting, I would have just like tore this pattern apart and knit it in a very different way. Meaning, when you knit the front, it's like 2 stripes. So these are each stripes, right? So it's 2 stripes on the front longer than the back. So the back depth, I think something was like 7 inches. It wasn't very deep. I usually like it at like 10. And so I was like, what's going on with this? Is this what's intentional? And the answer was yes, because if you can see here in the back, this is the front part, but it folds over in the back. It like comes to the back a little, like more so than you would normally expect with the technique, because the front is knit longer. What it does is it shifts everything back. It also means that the neckline is a little bit lower on this one. So that's what happened with that. I really love the texture. So I knit the size 2 width, but I knit the size 3 sleeves. I will say I am skeptical. I have tried this on a few times about the depth of the armhole. I realize for men's sizing, it's usually quite big, or yeah, it's bigger than like this is graded towards a typical woman sizing. But I still think that this might be too shallow, but trust the process. So that's really important with test knitting, is like I knit the back yoke the way that she wanted me to. I knit the front the way that she wanted me to, and then I have the binding. So it's, the size 3 sleeve opening, so I don't have to recalculate any sleeves. I can go through and test that part of that pattern for the size 3 for her. So I think that that's important to note, as opposed to what I would normally do, just like go off the rails and do something else. I probably would have made the neck different so it didn't curl back as much and it sat a little bit higher, so I would have added rows here and I would have taken rows off here personally. But I'm a test knitter. I need to be good. I need to give solid feedback, and there was some feedback on that. Another thing is she has this really cool, you can see it in the front, this detail of like a bind off for the collar, which is a like Russian Instagram technique video sort of thing, and she explains it pretty well. It's really nice. I think it makes a nice finish. Now, what I will say is I spent a full weekend day on this collar. What I did is, from experience, I knew that what she put is not going to work for me. So because of the shape of my neck, I do not like a folded over collar. When I do a folded over collar, I think it tends to sit like upright a little bit more, and it looks a little bit more mock turtleneck. I think with something like a lighter weight yarn, like a fingering or a sport, it's okay. It's easier, but for like a worsted weight or something, I mean, for sure it's a no-go for me. But she had the option of just a straight neck, and so I did that, and I went through that. So what I ended up doing was knitting this on 5.5 millimeter needles. I sized up to get gauge for this. It looks beautiful. The process is great. But for the ribbing, she said to use 3.75 millimeters and pick up at a certain rate, which is like, I would say fairly standard pickup rate. But there are two things. Is even though I'm knitting this at 5.5, this is still a sport weight yarn. I would not normally knit a sport weight yarn ribbing on 3.75 millimeters because it gets like a sport weight gauge. And I just think that that's too loose. It's just not the type of ribbing that I want for sport weight yarn. And so I did it at 3.75 millimeters. I picked up the stitches at the rate that she wanted to, and I did everything. I did a quick and dirty cast on, but in general, for the flat neck, it was way too much fabric. Like I undid it and I redid it the way that I knew it would work. And I had so much extra yarn on this ball afterwards because it was just so much fabric. What I will say is, with like a folded over collar, I think what she said would have been fine. But as is, this did not sit flat and nice on my neck, just because of like the loose gauge and the amount of stitches. It was just a lot. So I gave her that feedback, and hopefully she'll change it in the pattern. Also, because the neck opening was quite large, there was this yoke depth this ribbing depth is more deeper. I swear I speak English, than normal. So there is that. Because I tried her neckline and did it the way that she did in the pattern, and I provided feedback on that, I then ripped out and I did it differently. So I used a 3.25 millimeter needle, and I put some short rows in the back. And this was not supposed to happen, but I could foresee this issue. I mean, it's knit in a way where technically you don't really need short rows to raise the back, but I can tell you right now, with the back being so shallow, I needed a little bit more oomph. And then also it made it so the collar laid nice and flat on my neck. So it wasn't very much in terms of short rows, but I did add them in like, you know, this U section of the back. So I did add 4 short rows, I believe. And yeah, I because I know that it will fit me better, and I was a little naughty. So the plan is knit this body. It will take me 1,000 years because it's just kind of that stitch pattern where it takes a while, and then I'll go for the sleeves and down. So what Rebecca has done with her test is given you a Word doc with suggesting, you know, privileges. And so the pattern live updates and everybody can give their feedback on the different things. And there's also an Instagram group where you can send pictures and chat and do whatever. So I put my modifications or suggestions on the Word doc, but I also put it in the group so people, I don't know, may not read those. I have those there. And then I send like pictures and stuff. So when the neck wasn't fitting, I sent a picture and was like, look, this is what happened. And it's also really nice because then I can see all the different colors and the different yarns. I think most people bought some Ulis for this, which is fine. It's the recommended yarn. It's a nice yarn. She gave a generous 12-week test time for this. And I am a fast knitter and I have a lot of time to knit, so I won't need that. I did start like 2 or 3 weeks late just because of yarn deliveries and some other stuff. So, but I think I'm caught up well enough now. But it is good to like check in with the designer, show some progress, make sure that like, you know, because otherwise if you don't hear anything as a designer, you're sort of like, is the pattern okay? Are these people doing it? Did they ghost me? Ghosting is an issue with the testing. And so there's all of that. So this is my Kip sweater. I think that's about all I have to say about that. It's going to be long, but like easy from now on. I'm really going to like this because I love a textured knit and I think that this has a beautiful texture, and I think that the shape, like just the drop shoulder of it, is going to be really like nice on my body. So I'm looking forward to having this sweater. I normally would not apply to a big test like this, but I think it's going to be such a beautiful sweater on me that I'm like into it. So that is my latest testing sort of thing. I'm going to be putting out some more patterns at the beginning of this year, later this year, and we'll see how those tests going. I'm getting some different ideas based on experience and stuff like that. Also, some people who have been testing the Knitting for Olive one have been getting into my DMs because I'm posting about it and we can discuss the pattern and all these other things. So I think that that's really cool. It's like building community and talking to people that I normally wouldn't talk to. So I think that that's really a cool aspect of the test knit. I'm not like, I'm more of a lurker in the chat for the most part rather than like a participator. So let's do a little bit of a wrap up. So test knits are essentially a preview knit of a pattern. You shouldn't be troubleshooting a bunch of stuff. There are a bunch of different ways to sign up for the test. If you sign up, please show up, expect to buy your own yarn, and enjoy the pattern. I would say the more comprehensive feedback that you give and what you do to like fit your body, or if you don't understand anything, that's better. Post on Ravelry, post with good notes on Ravelry, post on Instagram, the different, you know, parts if you can. If it's just secret and you can't post it until the end, then just post, give a nice post at the end, tag the person, use the hashtag, do all that stuff. That makes you a good tester. You don't need to be like super involved, but I think the more like on the ball you are and like, you know, do it in time, making sure that you're like, hey, I'm still alive, this is this, and this, and be very like grateful. I mean, you're doing the designer a favor, but being very like appreciative of the collaborative process, I think is super important. And that is what I have to say about test knitting for now. I've been rambling on for way too long. We've only discussed 2 garments, but I think that this is a topic that people don't talk about a whole lot on YouTube. It's just like I was lucky enough to be involved with these 2 test knits, which were, I would say, fairly high profile. And I have, one lovely finished garment that's going to be nice and warm for the winter, or in this case, July in Amsterdam, because it's so cold. And this is going to be beautiful. I am very excited to have this, and this is going to just really make my needles nice. This is probably the last black sweater of the year. We'll see. I can't guarantee it, but I have other things I need to do, other people to knit for, and I have quantities of yarn in my stash. So there's something to look forward to, is a little bit of color coming up in these podcasts and seeing whatever I get up to. I have some plans. We'll see. Who knows? Who knows? But have a great summer. If it is summer where you are, stay cool. If it's too hot, stay warm. If it's too cold, be kind to yourself. Be kind to others. Enjoy your summer. Look at those test knits, and I will see you guys later. Goodbye.